Hello, and thank you for joining us today. This is the Data Collection Toolkit, everything you need to organize, manage, and monitor classroom data. It is presented by Dr. Cindy Golden. And while you're joining us today, make sure that you join our free community teaching all students. And so the link is edweb.net/inclusive education. And then to get your CE certificate, you'll be emailed your CE certificate on the next business day after this webinar. You've pre-registered with your email address before logging in, if you've logged in today with your email address. And tomorrow you'll be getting a recording. And then for viewing this webinar, we do have a special offer. So it's 20% off at brookspublishing.com with the code EDWEBCG, all caps. And now I'm very excited that we have Dr. Cindy Golden with us. She has over 30 years experience in working with students with disabilities. She is currently serving as an adjunct faculty member of the University of West Florida, and she has actually been bragging about how great the weather is down there, so lucky for her. And she's also an autism consultant for the Florida State University's Center for Autism and Related Disabilities. Before retiring from public education, Dr. Golden last served as the assistant director and principal psychologist of an educational and therapeutic program, serving students with severe emotional and behavioral needs. She was the author of several popular blogs for parents and teachers of children with special needs and has written numerous online articles. She is considered to be an expert in the field of special education and is a popular speaker at local, state, regional, national, and international conferences, along with being a sought-after trainer of educators across the country. So what a phenomenal bio. So I would like to turn it over to Dr. Cindy Golden.
Well, I am so happy to be here. Very, very happy to be here from sunny Florida, where I am in my shorts. We're going to talk today about data collection. That is that's a love of mine. Being a special educator for so long, I'm finding that data collection is becoming more and more important. When I did leave the classroom as a classroom teacher a long time ago, about 20 years ago or 25 years ago, it just did not seem as important as it is now. And so teachers, I'm finding, since I am an adjunct at the university, I'm finding that this area is not taught as much as other areas in the field of special education. So that's where this book came from. I just thought that teachers needed some kind of easy way to manage the overwhelming area of data collection in the classroom, because it will quickly burn out teachers. So that's what this is all about. So where do you collect data? You collect it everywhere. I have had homeschool parents want to collect data in the home. I've had Boy Scout leaders, Girl Scout leaders need to collect some basic data in the meetings, speech language pathologists in the therapy sessions, basic classroom teachers in a general education environment, special education environment, a more inclusive setting, in a hospital setting, on the bus. We've collected data in all different places. But there are so many different things that you need to think about other than just grabbing a data form and starting to collect data. So that's what this is all about. I'm going to try to turn three things at one time. I came up with some basic goals. What I like to do is take a difficult topic, condense it down into step-by-step ways of dealing with this. And it's like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? That's kind of the same idea. Today, we're going to very quickly talk about the first step as to why I should collect it. We talked a little bit about that just now. Number two is the basic steps to data collection, because you can't forget a step. Training is very important. The analysis is very important. Follow-up is very important. So there are basic steps, and I've got a little table that will help in that. The third one, we're going to branch out and talk about the different areas of data collection. One of the biggest ones is academic data. Step 4, we're going to talk about behavioral data, which is kind of my area, and I love that area, and it's very important in the classroom. Also, IEP data. There are a lot of times, I hate to even say it, but classroom teachers would come to IEP meetings without any data. You know, they were just going on a whim and just talking in generalities about the student's progress, but you have to have the data. We're in a litigious society, especially in education, so you have to have data to back it up. Number 6 is the organization of data. Okay, you've got all of these raw data sheets, hundreds of raw data sheets. Now, what are you going to do with them? So I want to talk about that. And that is an area that many people do not get trained in. They never talk about that part. They just take it for granted that which teachers are very organized, but they just know how to organize all that data in a simple manner. And then step 7, we're going to talk about data analysis. That is another area that gets forgotten about. And then the use of data. Where are you going to use it? Now you've got it analyzed. Now what are you going to do with it? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so why do I need to collect data? This is pretty quick, self-explanatory. You have to make decisions based on data. Again, I said that the educational field is a very litigious field anymore. Everywhere is very litigious. And you just have to. You can't go into IEP meetings. You can't make decisions about interventions, about strategies, about behavioral strategies without basing it on data. So we are always going data-driven decisions. What are the facts? Let's see. Okay, the 3 reasons, another one, to collect data, to answer basic questions. And that's one of the first things that we're going to go over. In order to collect data, you have to have the question to start with. You have to start from ground zero. Everybody has to understand the question that the data will answer. So you are making good decisions about what types of data to collect, how to analyze that, and then what to do with it. So data is collected to answer basic questions. Also to refute or support a theory. Used to 30 years ago, 35 years ago when I was in the classroom, it was easier to, and a little more lax when we thought about putting in strategies, academic strategies, behavioral strategies in the classroom to assist students with specific needs. Now we can't do that. We need to make sure that they are data-based decisions, data-based interventions and strategies. And to also measure progress, we have to know where the students are at the baseline, how much progress we've made, monitor that continually so that we can make intervention modifications, changes, or continue on with that intervention at the right time. We can't wait to the end of the year to start making those interventions and strategy changes. So those are really the 3 basic reasons for data collection. Okay, preparing for data collection in the classroom. It's overwhelming. So many times I would have the new teachers come in straight out of college. They would be so excited. They'd get all of their bulletin boards up and they'd get all their materials together and they would get all the books and they'd meet all the students and do all the fun stuff that we do as educators. And then they would think about it. It's like, oh, wait a minute, I think I forgot something. Especially special education teachers. You have to prepare for IEP meetings in terms of the data collection. That's one of the biggest areas. Can it be collected in all environments? Absolutely so. I have arranged for data collection process and program to be done on the bus, which is good information. Also, after school in the less restrictive, more fun activities, you know, sports and things like that. So it can be collected in all environments. Who will collect it? Anybody can collect it as long as training is involved. And that is the big thing. You cannot hand over a data collection sheet to someone working in the classroom with you unless they're trained. I've done numerous for hundreds of paraprofessionals. I've done training recently over the last probably 4 months to literally hundreds of paraprofessionals and training them to do the same types of things that the teachers do. It's very, very important that they know what's going on in the classroom. Otherwise, the teacher is going to be there trying to manage all of this. If you have the luxury of having a teacher's aide or a paraprofessional in your classroom, use that person, train that person to be that peer in the classroom. Typically, when you're preparing for data collection, you need to remember 3 areas. It is academic behavior and IEP goals. Academic is typically the progress monitoring that goes on in the classroom. The behavior is basically the behavior. And then IEP goals, you have to have the data to back up the IEP goal changes. And then we're going to talk about design collection. When do you do data collection? You have to have it on a lesson plan. You have to have a plan for data collection, because I promise you it will not get done, especially academic data. You will be so swamped with all the other responsibilities that you've got in the classroom. I know, I've been there. That this will be lost in the shuffle. So we're going to talk about some ways to actually put it on that plan so that you know when it comes up, and so it doesn't get forgotten about. And also the times of day, which is important. Okay, let's jump into the basics of data collection. This is a great form. It makes it very simple. Again, I like to take a difficult task and condense it down into the basic steps so that you will not forget about the basic steps, and everybody is on the same page. This is a wonderful sheet to put inside of a training manual. If you're going to train people in your department, if you're going to train staff members within your classroom, it would be wonderful if you had a classroom, if you had the luxury of having a teacher's aide, the speech pathologist, the occupational therapist, anybody that comes into the classroom, maybe get them together for a bi-weekly meeting or something and do some basic data collection training so you're all talking the same talk. This is an area in the colleges that tends to get forgotten about. What are the basics? How do I do data collection? Everybody thinks you just know how to do it once you get out of college and get your classroom, which is not true. The first thing that you need to do is define that target. You have to know where you're going. I think I made mention in the book, it's like starting out on a vacation without a map. You know, great, we're going to go on vacation. We are starting the car, load everybody up, and we are headed out somewhere. We have no clue where we're going. You've got to know where you're going. You have to define that target so that everybody is on the same page. That defining of the target, you operationalize the behavior or the skill that you're measuring. That is what your entire data collection program is based on. You can't select sheets unless you know what you're doing. Worst scenario that I have seen is a teacher gets to the end and has collected literally hundreds of pages, just all kinds of pages of data, raw data, and it didn't even match to what the target was. So you have to know where you're going before you get started. Next is select the method, and we're going to talk about that. Again, it is based on defining the target. Next, you're going to implement the data collection. After the method is the appropriate method has been selected, and after the target has been defined, and after the training has occurred prior to that, then you're going to analyze and graph. This is a huge area. I'm a big one for graphing this data. Put it in a visual format so that everybody is on the same page and it makes sense. You have to make it make sense to the user and to the parent. If you go into an IEP meeting or you try to talk to a layperson about data, their eyes are going to roll back in the back of their heads. You're going to have to make it into a way, put it in some kind of format so that they understand it. And then make decisions. That's why you collect data to begin with, is to make decisions about the data. So that form is great. That would be a wonderful way to start off the data collection training. Okay, so we kind of went over this this slide, I want you to realize the one thing. On the select a method, always work backwards, and that's the way that I teach. Always work backwards. Again, selecting and defining the target, operationally define it. You work backwards, just like you would on a vacation. You decide where you're going first, then you work backwards. The 3 decisions that you can make, and we'll talk about a little bit about this in a few minutes, but making decisions on an intervention, academic or a behavioral intervention, you're going to do either 3 things. You're going to continue the intervention, you're going to modify the intervention, or you're going to stop the intervention. So that is the questions that you're going to have to answer based on data. You can't do it just, I don't think this is working, because the data may show that it is working. Okay. Determining target behavior. Let's talk about this for a minute. A description of behavior. You can walk into a classroom. I was a psychologist for a long time, and I would walk into a classroom and I would get these frantic things coming from the teacher. I would walk into a school and get this frantic information from the administration. And I would get phone calls from parents, frantic, this behavior is just out of control. Okay, well, describe the behavior to me. Well, the child is tantruming all day long, and it's just out of control. It's very disruptive. They don't do their work. They run away. They yell. And just all of this information about tantrums and about disruptive behavior. And I would go into the classroom and I would think, I'm not really sure what I'm looking for. That description of a tantrum can mean something to me and something else to someone else. I was in a setting to where I worked with severe students with psychiatric diagnoses. A tantrum to me looks very different from a kindergarten teacher who may have an inappropriate behavior in her classroom. So it depends on your experience to what a tantrum is going to look like. So when we're talking about behaviors and the target, everybody has to be on the same page. So it's very important when you're coming up with a target behavior, it's very important to operationalize that behavior. Then you're going to come up with a function of that behavior a little bit further along, but you're going to come up with a function of the behavior. And for this student on this slide, this was non-compliant. And this would be a wonderful way to sum it up at the bottom. It says, when presented with a written task, Lisa is non-compliant and will. Then they went on to describe exactly what they were doing. But the basic target behavior that we were looking for was non-compliant. She was not doing what she was asked to do, and it was described as those behaviors. So that kind of helps us. The function of the behavior and the replacement behavior, we talk a little bit about replacement behavior in the book. It's very important to know the function of the behavior. You have to, if you're going to go on to replace it with a more appropriate behavior. Replacing the target behavior, inappropriate behavior, with one that serves the same function. Let me explain this for a minute. If a child is exhibiting a behavior for a certain reason, the function of the behavior is to escape. They're yelling out, they're doing something for escape. If you decrease that behavior based on the data, if you decrease that behavior, if you don't replace it with a behavior that is more appropriate, that child will replace the behavior with one that he chooses, he or she chooses. And most likely that's not going to be the one that you want. So we talk a lot about target behavior. We talk a lot about replacement behavior and function of the behavior in the book. And it's all based on data. Okay, this is a wonderful chart that's in there. This would also be a great training. You can just talk about the target behavior. Exactly what do you see when you walk in the classroom, and what does that teacher want to decrease? In this chart, it says refusing to complete work. That is the behavior that teacher wants to decrease. The function, why is that child, based on the data, that child, we have found that child is refusing to complete work to escape it. That child may not know what they're doing. The function is to escape the task. So the teacher needs to put in a replacement behavior, and that's part of the intervention based on the data. They can raise their hand or to request assistance. They can use a card, a visual cue to request a break, things like that. So an operational definition is very important so that everyone is on the same page. Everyone needs to be on the same page, especially if other people in the classroom are taking data. Okay, let's go on to academic and progress monitoring. I'm trying to make sure of the time and make sure I get through everything. Okay, let's talk about academic monitoring of areas in the classroom using data. Can be completed in different environments. Absolutely. It can be completed in a restricted setting, like a self-contained setting. Many areas of the country still have those. And it also can be completed in a regular education setting. Okay, there are a lot of different methods, and data collection sheets are included in the book for every one of these. Rubrics are a wonderful one of my, my favorites. Task analysis, yes, no, and prompt. So let's keep going. I'm going to show you some examples. Progress monitoring, one of the best ways to monitor progress. I know that many counties, I know around here in Florida, many counties have county-wide progress monitoring tools, and those are wonderful, but sometimes they're not enough. Sometimes teachers have to do curriculum-based assessments, which are the basic assessments within the classroom based on just the curriculum that they're using. It can be a teacher-made test. It can be a pre-made assessment based on books. But progress monitoring is very important, and I included a lot of data sheets in the book to help you just to create a visual graph of your basic progress monitoring. If you do things like facts, basic math facts, multiplication facts, it is very important to actually have that in a graph format so that you can quickly see. Teachers don't have time to look through all the pages and see how many they've increased over the last week and over the week before. If you've got it graphed, you can easily, one sheet, bam, 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 you can see exactly how much progress it's made. So that's one of the areas that's very important. This simple little graph, it's very easy to do. I call them quick graphs, because as you monitor the student's progress, as you score that, you immediately put the dot right there for, I can't see who this is, Jasmine Jones. You can immediately, the pre-test, where were they on, math facts? This is a pre-test. Okay, well, the next pre-test, let's go ahead and put a dot there. So you can easily see, link the dots together with a line. Now, the intervention is marked and is always marked on a visual formatted graph with academic data or any kind of data by a vertical line. And you do not link the two dots pre-post that vertical line, because that intervention changes something in the environment. And it would be very helpful if you would note what that intervention was. So you can see that based on this data, that intervention was making some positive progress in this child's ability. So that's a great sheet, and it's very, very easy to do. Rubrics. Oh, rubrics are so cumbersome, and we use rubrics in the college setting a lot. But how are you going to measure, and how are you going to check based on a rubric? It's very difficult to check pre-post. If you're measuring a written expression, a couple of paragraphs that a child does, it's very easy to use a rubric to score written expression, but then comparing the two, it's just difficult. It's very difficult. So I thought, well, we've got to come up with a way to visually make a graph out of a rubric. So this is what I came up with, and it's been really helpful. It's been really great. And I call it, again, a quick graph, because immediately this is the score sheet for the rubric, and it becomes your graph. You don't have to do two things. That's the one thing I did not want, is to have to score something and then have to go back and graph it after the fact, because you just don't have time. I didn't have time. There are several examples in the book. There are blank ones that you can create your own, and there are also ones that are kind of pre-made. But you see the pre-test, the post-test, it's easily, you can draw a line between the pre and the post so you can see where progress is being made in specific areas. And this is just with writing. I mean, you can do it for projects, science projects, things like that. Task analysis is very important. A yes/no data sheet is not helpful sometimes for some tasks, and I'll show you an example in a second. You have to task analyze. You have to analyze the task so that the task is broken down. For example, the example that's always used is making a peanut butter sandwich. What are the steps in making a peanut butter sandwich? Can they make it? No. Okay, well, what about that can't they do? What do I need to teach? You have to break it down step by step. And if you take data on those steps and you know exactly where the progress is or the lack of progress is, you can see those discrete areas. This one, cleaning the kitchen. This poor child, for what, 11 days, it was no. Well, that poor child, I know somewhere in there that child is making some progress, I would hope, in 11 days. So it is important to task analyze. This is another way to task analyze. At the very bottom of the graph, it's analyzed. The task is analyzed. And what you could do is you could analyze the task of cleaning a kitchen. Don't put names on it or anything, and use this same one over and over, because cleaning a kitchen is cleaning a kitchen, or making a sandwich is making a sandwich. And you can use these for different, you can just file them away and pull them out, when you're doing that task. But it's a very simple way. Pre-test, what could they do? What is the prompt level needed for independent functioning for each of these steps? So you look at it and you see, well, the wiping the stove, they're not making as much progress on wiping the stove, so we might need to concentrate on that. But whatever we're doing for the rest of them, this child is making progress. And these are predetermined levels. Yes, no is a great way to measure independence. This is like cold probes. We'll talk about that in a second. These yes, no data sheets, you can certainly give these to the administrative assistant, the secretary, a bus driver, in the school, and just a basic, did the child say hello this morning? Yes. You don't need to know anything else, just yes, the child could say hello. And so that way you are getting information from a lot of different areas. This is one of the ones that are included, a simple yes, no quick graph. And again, it's a quick graph because the graph is built into the data sheet. As you score it for each of these, you could do this during a calendar time. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, the mastery level, and then you highlight the yes, no's, and you can quickly turn it vertically, and there's a graph. Bam, you got your graph. You go into an IP meeting, this is your graph. Prompt levels is also important, especially with our students who are a little bit lower functioning. It's very important to know what type of prompt is needed and where are they making progress on the prompt levels to reach independence. Our goal is to have the child reach independence. You can either use, and there's a whole training in this, but you could either use a least to most or a most to least. You're getting stronger with your prompt levels, or you're backing off on the prompt levels. A least to most is usually used with students who can learn quickly and the errors don't interfere. Now, you're going to use the most involved to the most intense prompt if the students learn errors, because you're not going to want them to learn those errors, and so you're not going to want them to make it. So we're going to I'll show you some other training sheets. This is another great one to put in that training manual. It explains prompt levels. If you're going to have a data sheet that takes data on prompt levels, you're going to have to know, and everybody that's taking data within that classroom is going to have to know what the prompt level is. Full physical, it goes from full physical all the way down to independent. And you can go over, and that is going from the top to the bottom. It's going from the most restrictive all the way down to the least restrictive. So it just goes over basic prompt levels. Great training. But in order to take data on prompt levels, you need to understand prompt levels. Okay, this is a great one, and I did a couple of different ways on this. This is a simple prompt level quick graph. You can put, for this child, you can put each of the skills down the side, and you can, this one is predetermined, but there's also a blank one where you can determine your own levels, own prompt levels, and define them at the top left-hand side. You can graph them by coloring them in, shading them in, or you can also graph them by putting a dot. I tend to like the dot because it's easier to do it than, shading in with a pencil. But you can do it either way. Easy, very easy, and you've got an automatic graph. This one is also good, and this was just for basic shapes. You can use this for discrete trial training sessions, which is a training in itself. But if you do use DT in your classroom, great little graph for that. That vertical line or that horizontal dotted line is the mastery level. That mastery level is important because at an IEP meeting, you've already determined the mastery level using this graph. There's no need to take all this raw data and then go back later at night on Saturday night when you're watching TV, go and graph all this data. You shouldn't have to do that. You take the data, you plot the points while you're doing it, and it automatically graphs it for you. So this is a great one, and it tells you the mastery level. Have they hit the mastery level and for how many days? Okay, let's quickly go over behavior. I can't believe I said quickly go over behavior, but let's try. Your goal for behavior is to increase independent self-regulation. They need to understand their behavior in terms of society and what society wants and needs. And you want to decrease the inappropriate while putting in those replacement behaviors. Inappropriate behaviors are communication. Behavior is communication. They are trying to communicate to you something. So they're in need of something. There is a function to that behavior. When you find that function, then you can come up with an alternative appropriate behavior and replace it. And so hopefully you want the blue and the green line to go up. The red line's not so good. You don't want that. This is a great other training sheet. Copy it, stick it in a training manual. These are the 4 basic types of data. And there are other types of data, latency data and interval data and things like that. But these are the 4 basic behavioral data. And it tells you, if you want to know how many times the behavior occurs during the day, you want frequency. That's the data of choice. If you want to know how long the behavior occurs, how long it occurs, duration, that's what you want. How intense it is, intensity. Or if you want to know what time of day, and this is typically where you're going to start, you want to scatterplot data, which in this book, it could also be a time interval. Okay, so we're going to skip through this. It's important to train. Okay, let's go ahead and go over frequency. It's very important to know how many times a behavior occurs. And if your final goal is to decrease the number of occurrences of behavior, then you're going to want frequency. You can take frequency and intensity at the same time, and I'm going to show you how. Okay, let's look at this. Frequency data, there are several in there, but this is one where you can take frequency data and it's graphed at the same time. Now you can put a dot on this data sheet, or you can put a line like I did. You can put shaded boxes. You can do whatever you need. But when that intervention occurs, you see that I put that dotted vertical line. That is the intervention. You don't connect those dots, but you've automatically got a graph. This is frequency. It's one example of a frequency. Now, you can also take frequency. Sometimes, I know in my setting, the intensity was also important to me, because the frequency of the behavior, if the intensity decreased, the frequency stayed up, there was still progress. Okay, the intensity was getting lower, but there was still that same elevated number of behaviors occur. It's still progress. You're making progress. So that was very important to me. Easy way to do this. This is included in there. Just color coded. On the back of this data sheet are colors. You can define those, specifically define it. I can't say this enough. It's very important that everybody is on the same page. That's the operational definition. operational definition to this intensity levels is to say exactly, like if I came in as a total stranger, I'd know exactly what a red, yellow, and a blue behavior look like because it's listed on the data sheet. So this is a great way to do that. Duration is the time. Duration is different from latency. Latency is you give a child the direction and it takes them a little bit of time. You know, those teenagers, middle school, I was a middle school teacher, so I know you give them a little bit of time to actually, comply with your demands. That is latency. That's different. Duration is like, for lack of a better term, a tantrum, an episode, behavioral episode. How long does it last? Again, you may be having the same number, but the duration of the behavior is decreasing. If a child is throwing themselves on the floor, heaven forbid, 10 times a day, and the total time away from task is, 2 hours, but their next, couple of weeks, you implement an intervention, they're still throwing themselves on the floor for 10 times, but the time off task is only 30 minutes total now. There is absolutely progress. That's what you want to know. Duration data sheet, the quick graphs. This is a great one. You just turn it vertically to see it, to set it up. And it tells you, you just plot it. You put the time start, the time end. You can calculate the number of minutes and plot it, just right there. No, doing it after school. This is a great way to do duration and intensity. Think about the same thing. You're going to want to know how intense that behavior was. And so you can see if you're moving to the blue, that's wonderful. You are making progress. And it's not based on your mood. I mean, if it comes to the 1st of May at the end of the day on Friday afternoon, I'm sure that your patience level is going to be a lot less than it would be in September. So it's not based on that. It's based on cold, hard, operationally defined intensity levels. Intensity, again, you can do this. It's the how severe a behavior is. And you can do this while measuring other things like frequency or duration. This is just a plain intensity graph, and this is certainly there. You operationally defined each of the intensity levels, and you can see it. You plot it on there, what day it is. And I want to tell you, the very top, it says page 1 of page 1. That's very important because I have gone into classrooms and I've gathered up all the sheets that I could find. Well, I didn't know that there were like 15 or 20 hiding in a file cabinet somewhere. Well, that was good data, but I didn't know that they were even there. It's very important to date those sheets, to number those sheets, and to put how many total number that you got. That's very important. This, again, is color coding. Scatterplot data is real important to start off with. You want to know when during the day, especially if you're teaching middle school, when during the day is a behavior occurring. I also label this as time interval because you could use this as a time interval. If there are too many behaviors that are occurring to count, you just cannot count them fast enough, then you would use a time interval. You can plot the every 10 minutes, if at least one behavior occurs during that 10 minutes, you would mark it. So scattered during the day, where the behaviors are occurring. Time interval and intensity, scatter plot, quick graphs. This is great because you can do both. Look at this one. You see in the middle of the day, you see the red? That's when the major behaviors are occurring. At the beginning of the day, are they occurring? Yes, you've got some behaviors, but at what level? They're on a blue level, so they're not as intense. So something is going on during that middle of the day and during that certain time period. You see the time period, so you can try to figure out the blue part is during the middle. All the behaviors occurring during the middle of the day. I can't see this because it's so small. During this first part of the month, the behaviors were not as intense, but then they became more and more intense during that time period. So you would look back at that time period and try to determine what was going on, what was different then. Okay, these are just other types of data sheets. I want to quickly go on so that I can make sure that I get finished and get to your questions. This is a great ABC data sheet. And the reason that I like this ABC sheet, I've seen a million of them. Some of them I like, some of them not so much. I like to take some baseline data when I am right there observing a child. It's important when you're doing ABC, and ABC stands for the antecedent, what occurs before, the behavior, what is you're looking at, and then the consequence, which is that reinforcing the behavior. Okay, the context, quick, just check, 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 check. You can fill that out quickly. And these are during different sessions. The antecedent, these things are listed, or you can put whatever, if the antecedent is different, mark it off, bam. Behavior, describe the behavior in observable terms. On the behavior description, you don't put your opinion. You don't put what you think is going to happen. You put it as if I am blindfolded. You are telling me what the behavior looks like. Okay, that's the way I describe it to college students. You are doing this as if I am blindfolded and I cannot see it. You do not make opinions. You don't put in your opinion about a behavior. Very, very cold, hard facts. This is the part that I like about this one. It's the reason I put data in there. Is the intensity at a medium level? Is the duration? What do you think? And then a very basic frequency count. It's going to give you more information. Okay, let's quickly go over this because I want to get to analysis. Let me at least touch on analysis. Data collection. Okay, this is a little thing that I came up with, goal. In terms of writing a good goal for an IEP, these parts have to be in there. I used to teach this to teachers, and we would always start out the IEP goal with given. Given a journal prompt. That sets the stage. When you measure now, how are you going to measure? What is the child going to be doing? Well, she's going to be given a journal prompt. So given a journal prompt, Sarah will then tell what's observable. What will she do? She's going to orally read. So given a journal prompt, Sarah will orally read, very behavioral, very objective. A target is set. What is the target? What is the mastery level that you're looking for? And then limit the time. So the bottom is given a journal prompt. Sarah will orally read 90 words per minute at a mastery level of 3 and fewer prompts by when? May of 18. So that's your mastery level. That's just a good way to do IEP goals. Very objective. Data collection days. This is a great way to set it up. Remember, I was talking about set it up on your calendar, because if you don't, I promise you, time is going to get away. It's going to be 3 weeks, and you haven't collected data in 3 weeks, which is not good. In the book, I've got a lot of different ideas, and I won't take time because I want to get to the analysis of data. A lot of different ways to do this. So stations, round robin. I've got forms to do cold probes. I've got forms to do cold probes. That's a training in itself, doing cold probes. Multiple students for individual students. I'm going to show you some ways to organize it, and then I want to get to analysis because I've got about 10 minutes. One of the ways is very important to make sure that the data is private. It is secure. So what we did is we color-coded, the students in the classroom, or color-coded groups of students in the classroom, and then all the data was put on the clipboards in certain data collection areas with that color on the front. That color construction paper on the front, which is just a simple way. We also made this, it was neat because we made this out of I made this out of 3 laundry boxes. The huge laundry boxes that you get that are real hard cardboard. I just put felt around it and duct tape. You can get duct tape. And it becomes a little mailbox. And so we put data sheets in there. It works and it's cheap. You can also do color coding of the crates. We did that. If you can't find color crates, we stuck construction paper in there. It was up underneath, so everything was in there that the student needed. We color coded the folders. I'm a big color coder. because it makes it easy. It's hard set up, but it's going to make it easy. The paraprofessionals actually did this. Set it up at the very beginning of the day. Bam, it's all ready. This is data collection day. It's also a reminder for you. This is another one that was in the toolkit, the earlier toolkit. The work samples, it's very important when you get work samples from a student to make sure that they are analyzed. I've gotten many work samples without a grade, without a date. I don't know whether it took that child 10 times, wadding his paper up and throwing it away, or it was one time independent. I have no clue. And the teacher cannot go and analyze all that. She just doesn't have time, she or he. So these work sample stickers are in there, and you just slap that sticker on there and you check, 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 immediately analyzed. So the psychologist in the school will love you. Okay, if you hear something meowing, it's my cat. This is a great way to analyze data, and I came up with this acronym. It's called COVERT. And it's all around, data is like a detective. The whole theme is like a detective theme. You're looking for clues. You're trying to make decisions. So covert. One is to collect the data. O is to, the next one is organize it, visually graph it, examine and compare the data, review it for trends, and test out the interventions. But let's go over this. I've got just about enough time to do this. Okay, collecting data. Let's go back to this one. Collecting, you have to examine and compare the data, but you can't examine and compare the data without a graph. I can't. I cannot look at a bunch of numbers and just examine and compare it at all. There's no way. Then review it. You're looking for these 4 areas. This is one I want to touch on. So excuse me, but I'm going to flip through these. I want to get to reviewing it. So you've got all these graphs. How are you going to know what to do? This little chart is in the book. It's to remind you. You're going to analyze the graphed data in 4 different ways. First of all, you're going to analyze it. It was backwards, but let's analyze it in terms of variability. Variability is the spread of data. If you've ever looked at a graph and the dots are everywhere, they are just everywhere. There's a lot of scatter there. It's not going to be as easy to analyze because it's it's unstable. Okay, it can either be stable or extremely variable or extremely all over the board. So you're going to have to ask yourself questions, what is going on? So that will be one way to analyze that data. And there are specific ways. I'm not a statistician. I don't know. So I had to make it very easy for the teachers to determine how variable is that data. And I put step-by-step ways in that book. The levels. Is this occurring at a very low level? Or is it extremely high? I mean, the frequency is just extremely high. What you do is you take the graph and divide it into thirds. You can tell if the frequency or the duration, if it's at a very low level, it's in that bottom third. Middle is a moderate and a high level. So then you can describe the data. The trend line, I'll also give step-by-step instructions in there how to determine the trend line. If you're just looking at all these dots, pretend like you don't see that circle and that line. You're just looking at those dots. It's kind of hard to tell, is that going up or what is it doing, or is it staying straight? So I give you step-by-step instructions on how to do this. The way that you do it, you're going to want to know if it's increasing, decreasing, or if there's no trend at all. You just put a circle around the dots on the graph as tight as you can. Take the very middle of one end, the very middle of the other, take a ruler, draw a line through it, then erase the circle. You're going to be able to analyze that trend line just as that. Okay, now, so you've analyzed it in those 4 ways. I know I've got 1 minute. Now, how are you going to explain that? I provided a step-by-step way. I know my first IEP meeting with parents, I was scared to death. I was scared to death. I was 21, and I had these parents coming in. I thought, man, nobody has taught me how to do any of this, so I don't know what I'm doing. So, and you don't have a psychologist there. You don't have anybody there to help you go over this. So it's important to know what you're doing. So I give this narrative. The narrative has specific areas that you need to cover from the very beginning all the way down to the end. And it's got words. You can just plug it in, plug different information in there, and just take that, maybe take that, laminate it, take it to your IEP meeting, go over it that way. You can also use this as a way to determine the follow-up task and follow-up questions, because looking at the data, you're also going to need follow-up questions. The data is going to bring that up. Okay, I had to skip through a little bit of it, but do you have questions?
Hi, I'm back. So there was a lot of good information. I'm going to read I have about 4 questions here to ask. So one of our viewers asked, is there a good amount of information and graphs in this book which can be used for early childhood children?
Are there good information? Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Data is data. Early childhood, all the way. It's difficult sometimes to do something that will encompass all the ages, but data is data.
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely.
And then we have my other learners are suffering emotionally from my one student with behavioral issues. Are there any suggestions?
That's a training in itself. Behavioral training. It certainly is. But you're going to have to get an idea about this one child, because that one child is going to have appropriate interventions put into place. So I would just come up with a way to start collecting some basic data on that one child, and I would even sit down with a parent. I would sit down with administration, your support team within the school, and start finding out why that child's behaving like he or she is. And then you can put in appropriate interventions. But yes, you're right. That's difficult. It's very hard.
And then we have, how can you graph data or color code it when you are colorblind?
Oh, goodness. That is a good question. You can graph data, but you might not can color code it. You could do it with different symbols. You might want to put just a slanted line, as I had in one of those data sheets, it was just a slash mark, and maybe put an X, if it's more intense. You may have to come up with different symbols, maybe a dot if it's mild, a slash if it's kind of a medium intensity, a double X if it's pretty intense. But that's a very good question.
And then can you elaborate about what a data collection day would look like?
A data collection day. Okay, I would have it on the books, maybe week A, maybe 3 days. My collection days might be a Monday, Wednesday, and a Friday. I might take some cold probe data, and I went specifically through this in the book. Cold probe data in the morning. As they were coming in, they would grab a task to do as I was doing cold probe data. And then maybe they would do stations. They would do a rotation. They might have 5 rotations of a computer, working with a parapro, working with me individually, doing a worksheet, maybe doing a workbox if it's at that level. Every one of those can be data collection areas. Working with me certainly be data collection. Working with a para, she could work with a small group. That's listed in there, how to do that. And the worksheets could certainly be, and then the yes, no, were they independent and doing the workbox, that could certainly be, and it could have data sheets. They could come up and check that off. And then the computer could also be a progress monitoring tool, which would also collect data. That's specifically in a section.
All right, great. So I don't see any other questions. Well, actually, this will be your final question. We do have one more. It says, can I use Microsoft Excel to analyze my data?
Absolutely. And I talked about the use of technology. I talked about the pros and cons of technology. I think technology is wonderful. I think the apps on our phone are wonderful. But I'm also a proponent of plain paper pencil task, and I went over specific examples of why it's difficult to teach. A support person within the classroom could do this. They could certainly do graphs on this data because they're collecting the raw data. They can put the dots. That would help you out. But if you have to then go back to the Excel chart and put all this information in Excel chart, it's just going to take more time and more training. Then you have to be well versed in the use of Excel. And I've also had one example of the computer crashed. They had not backed up the data. They came to me. There was no way to save that. They had no data for an IEP meeting. Everything was in there. So there are pros and cons, and we did go over that. But
yes. All right. Well, I guess to wrap this up, again, a lot of great information. I know the wheels are turning in everyone's head. So if you're interested in buying the book, you can save 20% off at brookspublishing.com with code EdWebCG. I posted the link on the side. And a huge thank you, Dr. Cindy Golden. What great feedback we're getting. Phenomenal presentation. Very, very informative. So thank you very, very much for joining us.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And then, again, to get your CE certificate, you'll be emailed your certificate on the next business day after this webinar. If you've pre-registered with your email address before logging in, or if you've logged in today with your email address. And then if you're watching this as a recording, you can take the CE quiz to earn your certificate. And then make sure to join us for the next webinar. It's Introducing Restorative Teacher-Student Mediation, and that will be on Wednesday, December 6th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's presented by Ondine Gross. So thank you very, very much for joining us.